Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for yet another Tulane University Innovation Institute entrepreneurial webinar. Today, we are going over insurance best practices for startups. Today, we've got Michael Palmer and Max Grunig here today. I'm pulling up Michael's bio right now.
Jalen, if it helps, I can just introduce myself.
I've actually just got it. Michael Palmer is a seasoned insurance consultant specializing in group employee benefits and commercial lines of insurance. With a strong background in property, casualty, and employee benefits, he partners with startups to help them navigate the complex world of insurance, from group health plans and voluntary benefits to cyber liability and workers' compensation. Currently based in New Orleans and serving as a full-time consultant at Assured Partners, Michael brings a strategic approach to risk management tailored for early-stage companies. His insights help founders build scalable, compliant insurance frameworks that support growth and protect their teams. Michael, Max, thank you very much for joining us today. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Jalen. Thanks for everybody for showing up. Again, I'm Michael. I have a special guest that I work with too, Max Grunig, on the call, and wanted to really bring him in because really his knowledge on startups is pretty invaluable from his personal experience. He used to own a restaurant, and he probably be the first to tell you that, when it came to insurance, he didn't know the first thing of what to do and it just sort of figured out as he went. But I would say the data shows for founders, and on this type of thing, they are often neglecting the insurance part when they're on their first go around. Second, third go around, insurance usually becomes a priority. And we're going to explain a little bit why this will be more of like an insurance 101. And we can give you sort of the foundation of what you expect when starting a business. But to get rolling, I'm gonna let Max introduce himself really quick and give a little bit more of his background on his insurance venture and just his experience starting a business.
Yeah, so I'm Max Kronig. Been in the insurance business about 8.5 years. I was in the restaurant business for 10 years. Before that, restaurant business is all I knew. My dad owned a restaurant, and then I opened a restaurant with my wife in Lakeview. Did that for about 10 years, and then my buddy said, "You'd be good at insurance sales." I didn't even know what that was, other than what I bought at the restaurant. To Michael's point, my dad was very old school when he opened his restaurant and started working. So I didn't have much guidance in the terms of what insurance I needed, other than what the landlord or the bank told me I needed, right? So when you're starting a business, you're probably like thinking about all the things you need to do, right? Uh, Finding a space to lease, finding, employees, depending on what you're doing, finding your distributors, right? And a lot of people aren't thinking insurance. And if they are, they're only thinking with the bank and what the bank and what the landlord say you need, right? So some of the things, some of the slides Michael and I are going to talk through, we'll try and be brief because insurance can be very boring. And most of the time people are like, you'll hear it a lot. You'll probably say it if you start a business. You'll probably say to your insurance guy, like, you insurance guys always think the worst of everything. And the reason why we think the worst of everything is more than likely there's a story or an experience that we've had that correlates to that. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to stop us, but we'll try to make the best use of y'all's time. I'll just kind of telling you the basics.
Yes, man, Max and I aren't going to pretend that insurance is a very sexy topic. But we will get into it just again from more of an experience setup. But really quick, just why insurance matters. It's one of those things that if while you're going through your business, we think we want you guys to focus on, the important parts of starting the business, and whether it's your employees, your ideas, And we don't want something like a lawsuit or an accident to hinder that progress. So that's really why insurance matters. And then early on is really when it's most affordable, right, Max? And it's something that you can put in the back of your mind and really just protect you and help you sleep at night.
Yeah, I mean, so look, when you're starting a business, right? You're going to have to decide what insurance is best for you based on what industry or what business you're starting, right? That's step one. So what I personally would do is as soon as I decide, hey, I'm going to open a business, I'm going to find an insurance professional, right? I'm going to ask my banker, right? I'm going to ask my lawyer, hey, who do you use? I'm going to talk to a couple different insurance professionals, not for quotes. I'm not going to go to them and go, hey, can you give me a quote? I'm starting a business. I'm going to ask them, what kinds of insurance do you think I need more than just the general liability and property, that kind of stuff, right? We're going to get into those lines of coverage, but if you're an engineer, you're going to need professional liability, right? If you're in construction, you're probably going to need professional liability, pollution liability, right? All things that can be, depending on the size and scope of the business you're starting, can either be expensive or not very expensive at all, right? So many times when people get in business, myself included, um, they're just trying to do whatever they need to do to get the doors open, and then something happens, and then it's like a whoops moment where like, oh, we were supposed to have insurance for that, right? Or oh, a hurricane's coming through and we don't have business income or property insurance on the contents, right? We thought that was insured through the building owner. We'll dive into that, but for sure, find that insurance professional. It should be one of the first people that you reach out to and look for.
Yeah, so I mean, like Max was saying, the insurance for a business, it's not a very cookie cutter setup. Everything's tailored, every business is different. So emphasizing what Max said, it's just important to get, some agents to look into your situation and sort of see what your needs are, and make sure you're covered on all ends. But these are just some of the basics where that common mistakes at startups. First of all, they're probably like Max said, they're probably not thinking about insurance, which is fair because you're really focused on your business and getting things rolling. But you don't want to wait too long. One of the thing is, I mean, you can be underinsured or you can overpay. I think Max and I mean, we're working on a case right now where we're seeing somebody and we think they're overpaying by a long shot. Uh, having insurance is great, but we also don't want you throwing away your money. So, we want to make sure that's going in the right places. But as you scale and grow, it's important to make sure your insurance policies go with that. So, probably evaluating quarterly, every half year, just to sort of see everything lines up, is important. And just making sure on employee coverage and cyber threats. I mean, Max, I don't know about you. I get probably a data breach email from every week from somebody. So we'll get a little bit more into the cyber side of things, but it's just one of those things that people aren't thinking of these days that we want to make sure you're aware of. But I will hand it off to Max on some of the just again the 101, the essentials, the foundation of what a lot of these types of insurance policies are, and then he'll give you a little background too on, what that could cover and some examples.
Yeah, so when you get started, right, you're going to get a lease or something from your landlord or from, bank requirements. Most of the time the banks cares about the property and equipment, right? If they're giving you a loan to buy property or equipment, they're going to want to make sure that's insured, right? Up to a certain amount. Your landlord's going to want you to have general liability. So most of the time we think general liability, slips, trips, falls, right? Or, property damage to somebody else's, hey, my car is parked in the parking lot and a shingle falls off the roof and hits the car and damages my car. I'm just using that as an example, right? Um, the big two obviously that you see are general liability and property equipment. Worker property insurance. Workers comp, depending on the state that you open in, some states do not require workers' comp. Louisiana does, right? And the reason I kind of make that mention is like when I opened my restaurant, I didn't know that we needed workers' compensation insurance. It wasn't until an employee was like, "Oh, I think I may have hurt my back. Can we open a workers' comp claim?" That I was like, "Whoops," right? And as you're starting a business, that's not the only whoops you're going to have, right? There was many a times in my business owner days that I was like, "Oh, shouldn't have done that," right? Um, Professional liability, employee coverage, right? Whether it's employee benefits, there's also employment practices liability, things that you can look at when you scale, right? Employment practices liability is going to help defend you if somebody sues you for wrongful termination, right? You make a bad hire, you fire that person, that person makes a complaint with the EEOC or makes a complaint to whoever, and says that they were harassed or fired for a multitude of reasons. That's going to provide that defense. So that's not something you think about in the beginning, right? And it's probably not something that most startups buy, right? I would tell you from a startup, your core ones are general liability, property, right? And focus on business income, right? If I own a business and that business gets the roof blown off and I can't operate, that business income is going to kick in and help sustain my cost while it's either being renovated or possibly rent a trailer or something for you to work out of, and then workers' comp, right? Professional liability is important, again, depending on what type of business you open. If you want to take key person, Michael, you can real quick.
Yeah, key person and founders. I mean, that comes a lot in play. Sometimes, once investors get involved, that this might be a requirement if you have sort of the I guess sort of like a brain trust or founder. If something, I think a easier way to sort of break it down is almost like a life insurance policy. If something happens, if they go on disability or unfortunately, if something like they pass, then that key person founder's coverage can protect that business, help them, sort of ride out financially if they need help while they're finding a replacement. But that is probably just a very basic way to think of it because you're probably wondering, all right, what does that even do? It just, again, a lot of times it's just one of those requirements if, you're getting investors involved and then we can utilize it from there.
Yeah, I'll tell y'all too. I know the group's, it's being recorded and stuff, but if anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and interrupt me. I'm a from the restaurant business, so I'm a hospitality guy at heart. So feel free to ask any questions because again, insurance can be, you're like, what am I paying all this money for? Is that when you grow your business, you'll be paying a good chunk of change in insurance and you'll be like, what do I get? Right. So ask those questions. We kind of talked about this. General liability is probably the one everybody knows about, right? Somebody walks into my business, slips, trips on something, falls, takes a bite into a sandwich and cracks their tooth. What is general liability protecting, right? So it's going to protect that injury, that some of that property damage to others, right? It is not an auto insurance policy, right? So, if you get in an auto accident, you would need an auto insurance policy. And I'll kind of talk about that for a second in a minute. But often, required by landlords, investors, or clients, right? Almost everybody knows they need general liability. It's one of those requirements that everybody has. There is something that you should look at when you're doing a startup. It's called a hired and non-owned auto policy, right? If you are driving your vehicle or you employ somebody or a few people that are using their vehicles, you would need a hired and non-owned auto policy. That can be attached to the general liability policy or the auto policy or just standalone. It's one of those coverages that a lot of startups overlook, myself included, when I started my restaurant. And it's big. If you send somebody to the bank or to deliver something to a job site in their own personal car, their personal insurance is going to kick in if there's an accident. However, right, if they're carrying state minimum limits or limits that aren't that high, And if they sue the business, your business that you started, you are not going to have coverage for that unless you have hired a non-known auto policy. So basically, that protects the business entity in the event that person running that errand, going to the bank, running the Sam's, whatever, gets in that accident and they're driving on behalf of, I'm going to say the insured, which is basically the business. So that's something that you can add to the general liability policy and something that is overlooked quite frequently. So keep that in mind. Like I said, general liability, a lot of it. Again, if you call your insurance professional, one of the things that you should always do before starting a business is figure out what's my rate going to be, right? What's my cost? And I don't mean the cost of, oh, if I'm doing $2 million in sales, right? I want to know, hey, if I'm growing from 2 to 5 in my first 3 years, I want to know not what my insurance is at that 2 million. I want to know what the cost is per 100 or per $1,000 in sales. So I can figure out as I grow what that cost is going to be, right? So your insurance professional should be able to tell you, hey, you're opening up an engineering firm. The cost is $10 per $100 in sales. So that way you can take, if you do $1 million, you divide it by 100 or 1,000, and then you multiply it times that $10, right? I do it for my customers all the time. In fact, I had that conversation today with somebody that's acquiring another business, and he's like, "Hey, what's my rate?" And I send him a spreadsheet so he can type in, "Hey, we're projecting $300,000 in sales, but what happens if we do 1.2 million?" Right? Because what happens at the end of every policy period is you have what's called an audit. The insurance carrier can audit you, right? And based on what you reported in your sales and what you actually did, you can either get return premium, right, which means you did less sales, or if you did more sales, you'll get premium due. You'll have to pay more premium. So you don't want to be blindsided by that because you might think you're really busy, you're doing well, and then the insurance company hits you for a $30,000 audit. You're like, oh wait, there goes that extra profit. You can go to the next one, Michael. So property and equipment, I already kind of talked about this. If you have an office, even if you're not in charge of the building, right? They might ask you to do the betterments and improvements, right? You might, if you put in a kitchen and you want to insure that kitchen, right? Or all of your office space, your desk, your computers, right? All those contents, think contents. Business income, even though it's not really technically property, right? It is a property coverage, right? So you would need that as a standalone line with your property. So you can bundle it together. It's usually business income, property, and then personal property, which is contents. It says on here you can be bundled with liability coverage. In Louisiana, you usually can't. The property market in Louisiana, as you know, if you own a house or you got contents insurance on your renters, property insurance in Louisiana continues to be difficult, so it's not really bundled. Now, if you get outside of New Orleans and the Gulf Coast area, you can bundle that and go with more of a better carrier.
Yeah, on Max's point, like some of these insurance varies state to state. So some of the stuff could be a little bit different from how it's typed out, but just depending on where you're operating, it's important to look at, those state requirements when looking at your insurance needs.
So professional liabilities, errors and omissions, look, this is where you trust your insurance professional. And I can't make that clear enough because you could say, hey, I'm not giving any professional opinion. I'm not doing that. But the general liability policies are so long and it can exclude a lot, right? Some of those things you'd be surprised. Like if I'm a contractor and I sub out 100% of my work, I would need a professional liability policy depending on how my general liability policy reads, because they might exclude, hey, we're not paying. If you tell your sub, hey, this is what we need to do, you're acting professionally, right? So just keep that in mind. You see it a lot with architects, engineers, lawyers, medical professions, anything that usually needs a license, but it's also gotten expanded because of the nature of the general liability policies in today's world, how much they changed. You see this more and more, right? So again, trust your insurance professional with this, right? Cyber's big right now. Not one of those typical coverages that everybody gets right at fast, right? We don't want you to be insurance broke when you're getting started, right? But if you're doing a lot of online marketplace, storing credit cards, things of that, always get cyber. Now, cyber can be added to the general liability, and it's a little bitty, what we would call a sublimit, so it's not as high of a limit. I would always recommend buying a standalone cyber policy. Things that you see, I'll tell you a quick story. One of my customers had a fake purchase order come in. He sent $300,000 worth of equipment to a warehouse in Mississippi, right? By the time they realized it was a fake purchase order, the FBI went over there and it was already cleaned out. Like the warehouse was cleaned out, it was empty, right? So that was $300,000 of equipment. His cyber policy was able to help and kick in. And you see the cyber policy paired sometimes with crime. Like I said, employee practices liability. You can do like a bundled policy. But again, don't want a startup to be insurance poor. So just something to keep in mind of. And again, talk to your insurance professional, right? Again, why it's so important to go, hey, I want to, instead of getting a quote, like, tell me what I need and tell me how you can help me grow, right? We want to help. My goal as an insurance salesperson is to have your cost of doing business continue to decrease while your sales increase, right? We want to give you that power. All right, directors and officers. This is a new hot topic one. This is going to protect you against if you have a board, right? If you, let's say you're a tech startup, you have some investors, right? Those board members are going to want to see you have D&O coverage, right? If somebody brings a suit against the board or any officer of the company, this would protect you, right? Company funds, like, hey, an outside investor, I gave you $5 million and you said you were going to use it for purpose A and you can't account for that money, we're going to have a problem, right? So D&O has become more and more with the cost of doing business and the amount of investors you're seeing enter the picture, as opposed to, a few decades ago when you could get a business started off the ground with very little to no startup cost. Now you're seeing more and more people with, money pouring in, and, D&O is going to be one of those things that they want protection against. Go to the next slide, Michael. So before I turn it over to Michael, one of the things we don't have on here is auto insurance, or what they call, most people call an umbrella or an excess policy, right? Auto is one of those, if you're driving an auto for a company, or you buy a company auto, have auto insurance and don't carry state minimum, right? Carry 500,000. We particularly like to sell 1 million, but if you're getting started and you're like, I'm not worth $500,000 and neither is my business, then 500,000 might do it for you. I'll tell you, if you're in construction or you have to go to like a building downtown to do work in a building and you got to park, more than likely they're going to ask for $1 million, right? Again, so, general liability, workers' comp, property with business income, auto insurance, right? That hired and non-owned, or just regular standalone auto. Again, trust your insurance professional because they're going to be able to tell you what kind of coverages you need for each one of those. Before I turn it over to Michael, anybody got any questions on any of that? I know that was a lot and it was very kind of brief, but I don't want to bore y'all.
I have a quick question, just because a lot of our companies have like research laboratories, so they're like biotech in nature, and I know that's not exactly the same as like a business, like an ice cream shop where people come in. And so like, is there special insurance for like a scientific laboratory and equipment and does that look really different or cost a lot different than protecting, like, I don't know, your restaurant equipment, like your stoves and stuff?
Yes. So you can do a couple of different things, right? There's going to be different kinds of insurance that are specifically related to the medical industry, right? You would need professional liability. You would probably also need pollution, right? Like, so if something, look, everything is considered a pollutant. It's crazy. A truck driving down the street spills milk out the back of it, that's technically a pollutant, right? And you think, well, oh, I can get out there and clean it up. The issue becomes like, hey, like if the biomedical, like if I'm moving something from point A to point B and it spills in this building, right? That would probably be a pollution claim. There's also some product stuff there, depending on what you're developing, right? But off the top of my head, I would tell you, obviously medical malpractice, right? And there's lots of programs. I'm sure you know. There's lots of programs. I think Louisiana has like Lamico and stuff like that. There's lots of med mal programs. But off the top of my head, in terms of like the generic kind of insurance stuff, pollution, professional stuff like that. Now it would, if you have big equipment that you're moving around, like let's say you might move something from one lab over here to another lab, you might want to do like an inland marine policy, right? That would cover equipment that moves. It just depends on what exactly you're doing. Again, I always say, talk to your insurance professional. I would tell you, I am not a medical guy. I'm a contractor, hospitality, and transportation. Most of my book is construction, hospitality, and then limousines is most of my book.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so sort of what Max was getting at, there's a lot of more in-depth insurance policies, right? And so this is just really the basics, but like you said, trust your insurance provider. They will know if you need some of these add-ons. I know we're throwing a lot of big fun insurance terms at you, like inland marine and pollution and all that, but don't get overwhelmed by that too much. That's something that, again, as your business scales and grows and you have your business plan together, that can get a little more in detail with you. But in the key insurance person, key person insurance side of things, like I said, sort of at the beginning, if you weren't here, the best way I can explain this is sort of like a business like life insurance policy. And this probably won't be something you need on day one. Maybe as you scale quickly, or if your business is growing, investors get involved. They might want a CEO or founder of some sort that needs to be protected in case they're incapacitated. And this helps either do things like fund, keep the business afloat while they're figuring out the next steps to replace that person, or working on next steps to just, if they're gone, they need to figure out a plan to replace and make sure investors are taken care of as well. But again, it's not something you're probably going to need on day one, but just something to think about. Workers' comp.
I can talk on this one a little bit. Sorry, I didn't realize. Key person you also see a lot when you have a partner, right? So that comes into play a lot. So if you and your buddy we just had one of my construction customers buy a key person insurance policy because one's the business guy, one's the worker bee, the creative guy. And so what happens when something happens to the creative guy, unfortunately, if he passes away or something, how does this person go get another creative guy, or how does this, the benefit of buying out that entity? So usually, again, talk to your insurance professional, but lots of times with a partner. Go to workers' comp real quick, Michael. I'll be quick on this one. Workers' comp, again, required by the state of Louisiana. One of the most common mistakes that startups make with this is one, not buying it right when they start. It's based on your payroll. Again, you can get the rate and then figure out how much this is going to cost you for payroll, right? So general liability and workers' comp, you can project an update during the year, or figure out like, hey, I'm going to get audited at the end of the year. This is where people get hit with audits the most, because it's all W-2 driven, and the insurance company will ask for W-2s and quarterly tax forms, and then they match that to what you said you would pay, right? There's multiple ways to pay this, either monthly or in full. So again, talk to your insurance professional. A big mistake though is usually workers' comp policies are quoted at $100,000 or $500,000 limits. It is minimal. Like I'm talking $100 to go up to $1 million in coverage. Spend the $100, get the $1 million in coverage. Because what happens is you'll grow, you'll forget that you're carrying $100,000 or $500,000 limits. And then a claim will happen and you'll burn through that pretty well. This handles if an employee is hurt on the job, right? So the sole remedy for injuries in the state of Louisiana for employees is workers' comp. So I cut my hand open, I burned myself with medical stuff, any of that, all workers' comp would all go to workers' comp. This is also the most straightforward line of coverage, so you can figure out the cost as well as any discounts or credits you can get.
Yeah, Max, I mean, would you agree? Workers' comp is probably, if not one of the most important lines of coverage you're going to need from day one.
It's the one that this is one of the ones, this and auto are one of the ones that auto is not required. It is required by the state, but it's not one of those things that like you see. Workers' comp is required by the state. Auto and workers' comp, like if you have an employee, you got to have workers' comp. So, but it's not one of the things that you see on your landlord or your bank loans, right? Neither one of those usually say, hey, we need you to have auto insurance or workers' comp, right? So yeah, it's definitely one of the most important.
I'm going to hit on like employee coverage, employee benefits just a little bit. Again, the very early stages, this might not be a priority. I mean, you guys probably see it often, if you're applying for jobs or already working, you most likely expect to have, health benefits and such. But for example, if you're coming right out of college, you have a team of, a startup team, that's really boots on the ground and there's some ways around it. For example, you can be on your parents' coverage until you're 26. So a lot of people take advantage of that. So that might be a reason why employee coverage is not thought about in the beginning stages, if you guys are in that age range. But also, it is something that you should have on your business plan, whether it's on day one, it's great. You can have employee benefits and healthcare for your employees. But maybe it's, 2, 3, 5, 10 years down the road, once you start scaling and growing. Depending on the state, most states, a large group is considered 50 plus employees. So if that's once you get to that point, then it becomes more of a requirement. And then that will be a very common thing. But employees. You want them to be healthy. It helps with retention. And it's probably one of the most important factors as you're hiring, putting out job postings. A lot of people, expect to see employee benefits and those add-ons. But again, that is very scalable. You can have very basic employee benefits and coverage. You can give stipends to your employees to shop their own marketplace. But also, more and more companies are really trying to focus on assistance programs and add-ons to, just compensate their employees and make sure they're happy. So just keep it in the back of your mind. It might not be on day one, but it is something that is, really important for sustaining your business as you keep growing. Again, yeah, I sort of went over this. Sorry, I didn't have this slide up. But again, yeah, it's more for retainment and stability, and it keeps those your workers around, so you're not having a lot of turnover down the road. Max and I will go over this. I mean, scaling your coverage, he's talked about it. He's hit this a lot on certain examples. You're gonna want to keep looking at your insurance as you grow, whether that's quarterly, at least a couple times a year. Keep in touch with your insurance agents that you're working with and let them help you look at the big picture. Like Max gave an example. Maybe look at if you're making 1.5 million in sales, see what that cost is up front so you're not surprised at the end of the year when you realize you're underinsured, for example. So this is something early on. It's very affordable for most things. So you want to start making sure you're covered from the get-go. And then from there, it just makes it easier to scale that insurance coverage.
Yeah, I'll jump in and tell you, like, to the employee benefit coverage, right? Anytime you're starting a business, employee benefit coverage can be expensive, right? So, but there's also certain marks, like, once you get, and I'm not an employee benefit guy, but you get to 50 employees, you need to start doing things differently than if you had 35 employees. Again, talk to your insurance professional. I remember when I got started, I had me and my wife on the payroll, and it was before the healthcare marketplace, of pre-existing conditions and all that. So it was difficult to get insurance, and it wound up being a huge, significant chunk of our business income was going to health insurance at the time. In terms of scaling your coverage, again, I've said it multiple times. Talk to your insurance professional, right? As you grow and have contracts that come up, you're going to need to share those contracts with your insurance professional and then decide what coverages you're going to have, where you should have coverage, and continue to improve on your insurance program. No one wants to spend a lot of money on insurance. However, in today's world, with the amount of claims that can be brought and the things that can happen, as your company grows, you don't want to have a $10 million company and only have it insured for $2 million, right? You want to have an excess policy, right? Or an umbrella, as most people call it, but excess policy. You want to have cyber crime, EPLI, right? So continue to talk to the insurance professional as you get bigger.
Yeah, so like Max said, just trust your insurance advisor. They can really look into your claims and your contracts, sort of see what you need. Our goal at the end of the day between Max and I is we want to see the businesses we work with grow with insurance sort of be on the back of their mind, only use it when they need it, but at the same time just being protected. Last thing we want to do, like I said, I talked about this a little bit earlier. We don't want our groups overpaying too. So making sure they're properly covered and putting that money towards their business, their employees, where it matters most. But we can open it up if there's any questions. Jalen, I don't know if anybody put anything in the chat. If you want to open up anything or.
Yeah, so my question is, for those of us on the chat or maybe who are watching the recording that either are about to start a business or maybe be concerned that they haven't found the right balance of proper coverage and not overpaying, how can we get in touch with y'all, right? Like, are you available for those intro conversations that you mentioned? And like what's the best way to do that?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so sorry, go ahead, Max.
Yeah, Michael's going to share our contact information, but what I'll tell you is, as I mentioned when I was asked a question about medical insurance, right? If you call me and you have a question, I'm going to answer it to the best of my ability, and if I'm not the person, I'm going to find the person for you to talk to, right? It's so important in our business to be advisors, right? And be able to go like, hey, I can't help you, but I know exactly who can, right? So our contact information is there. But yes, we are both those guys, that will answer any question and help whoever is trying to get a startup going and what insurance they may need, and what coverages and things like that.
Yeah, Max hit the nail on the head. Like we're not gonna pretend we know every single industry. And I think one of the our strong suits is if we don't know something, we're gonna find someone who does. A great example is Max and I. We went on a business meeting once and it was on antiques, and we don't really know much about antiques between the two of us. But we know a guy who is an expert in that area over in Lafayette. So we're like, all right, well, this is a person you need to talk to and get more details on. But I think, it's just one of those things, start our early conversation, we can get the ball rolling. And then once it becomes a little more, intricate and specific on depending on your business needs, then we can bring in some other people and team members to sort of look into your situation to see if there's any other needs.
Yeah, and then would insurance prices vary based on how developed your business is?
I'll take this one. So yes and no. It really depends on the industry, right? So I'll give you an example. So like if you were like, hey, I want to start a limousine company, and I'm just trying to make this general. Most people want to see, it's the old what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? Like people want to see that you've had experience before they do anything with you, but you're like, how do I get experience if you won't let me do anything with you, right? So like for limousines, they want to see like 3 years of operating experience to go with certain carriers. So it's not really an industry specific thing. It's more of a carrier, so an insurance company specific. So I'll use a couple names like Travelers or Liberty Mutual. Travelers might write somebody with no experience. Liberty Mutual in a certain industry might want somebody to have 5 years of experience. So it just really depends. Again, I've said this a bunch, trust your insurance professional, because that is where that kind of comes into play. They're going to know who the carriers are that you need to be with, and if they're specialized in that industry, like medical, like bio stuff, they're going to be able to tell you, hey, this is exactly where you're going to have to be for 2 or 3 years, and then we'll move you to a better home in 3 years. But this is where you're going to have to be as you get started. So again, I wish it was a clear answer when it came to that, but it's literally depends on the carrier and the industry type you're in.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, I mean, Jayla, I don't know if anybody else has any questions. If not, we can give a few minutes back to everybody. But like I said, we have our information here. If you want to have more of a one-on-one conversation based on your business and or business ideas, just to get an idea of what you might need. Max and I are here, happy to help on anywhere you need it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you all again so much for giving us that chat. As I wrap up, some of the takeaways that I have are the common mistakes are waiting too long to get coverage, not updating your policies as your business evolves, and then overlooking things such as cybersecurity or employee coverage. There are various different types of insurance. For example, property and equipment insurance is going to cover kind of your office space and can be bonded or bundled with liability coverage. And then professional liability is going to protect against mistakes in your professional services. And it's especially important for software as a service, consultants, fintech, and healthcare startups. So thank you again for joining us. I'm going to stop the recording now. And if y'all wouldn't mind going to that very last slide for us.